Hello and welcome to the Practical Animal channel, the channel that showcases who's who and what's what with what in wildlife, the countryside and the animal industry. The channel is for you if you're curious about what it takes to work with animals in wildlife conservation or in countryside management. My guest today has a background of senior level leadership in zoological organizations, one of the biggest in the world, in fact. He's also got experience as a field biologist in Ecuador, and he's here today to tell us about the skills, the qualities needed to reach his position. Perhaps he can tell us a little bit about, on the website, the photograph that he's got with David Attenborough. So my guest today is Mark Habben. Mark is director of zoo operations at the Wildwood Trust. Mark, welcome to the Practical Animal channel.
Thank you very much, John. Nice to be here.
Likewise, Mark. Thank you for your time. So, Mark, as I said, you are director of zoo operations at the Wildwood Trust. What is the Wildwood Trust? What is Rewilding, Mark?
Okay, so Wildwood Trust is a conservation park, of which we've got two parks at the moment. We've got a large 46-acre forested park in Kent, just outside Canterbury. And we've got a space of similar size also in Escott in Devon. So we've got two parks at the moment. The predominant focus for the collections is for conservation breeding. So we breed a lot of different species with a view to releasing animals back into natural habitats. We're doing a lot of work and have done for a number of years with species like red squirrels, which are fascinating species, but sadly in the UK at the moment aren't doing as well as perhaps they once have done. And part of our aims is to look at why that is and what can we do about it. Also, very recently, perhaps the biggest project that we've got currently ongoing is a very large, very exciting wilding project in the Blean Woods, which we're aiming to see bison released out into this area in February of 2020, well, March 2022. And that's something that you can imagine has gained an awful lot of momentum. It's extremely exciting, and it's very new for the UK. It's something that in Europe we've seen quite a lot of, but certainly not here. So it's a really innovative project, and the idea behind that, and it kind of goes back to wilding or rewilding, is to look at what natural engineers we've got around us, what could we have, what could we use that otherwise would take up an awful lot of manpower to create the kind of woodlands that once existed within this part of our countryside. And the reason we're using bison is that at Wildwood specifically, we had a large plantation of non-native hemlock trees, western hemlock. And what we've noticed is that where the bison have got in amongst the hemlock, they've stripped all the bark. They do this amazing behaviour where they rid themselves of this dense coat. They rub up against the trees. And what we found is that native trees, particularly like your birch, your willow, hornbeam even, and certainly, of course, chestnut, have all thrived in and around the presence of the bison. But the non-native trees, and particularly the conifers, haven't. And it's actually felled a lot of those. So we had a lot of standing deadwood, which in turn, of course, encourages species like woodpeckers, a lot of different invertebrate life. But it also opened up the canopy to allow more natural growth and more ancient woodland species that we'd expect to see in that area come through. And I think rewilding specifically is largely about creating systems that enable the countryside to thrive with species that perhaps should be there, that have been there as well. And I think, in some respects, I think we'll probably come on to it, it's coveted a lot of controversy in some regards, because people often look at it as a look back into the past, but actually I don't think it is. It's a real look into the future of what we could have. And and to do it properly, of course, it takes an awful lot of people, a lot of landowners, farmers, huge communities, and that public engagement element. You've got to get that right. You've absolutely got to get that right to make these projects work. And so we're going through this with bison at the moment. We're soon to be working very closely with our partners at Durrell and Vincent Wildlife Trust on wildcats. We're currently engaged with the Kent Wildlife Trust, who are our partners on the bison project. To see the reintroduction of the chough, the red-billed chough along the Kent coastline. Really exciting sea lion bird, member of the corvid family, and it's part of the Canterbury coat of arms as well, so very relevant to the area that we're based. And so again, that's largely what we're about. It's about having species that have once existed in the UK or currently exist in the UK, and showcasing those to visitors, but also engaged in releasing and wilding projects.
Now, your title is Director of Zoo Operations at Wildwood Trust.
That's correct.
You've had an absolutely amazing career from what my research tells me. Please, could you tell me, and everybody watching, how did you do it? How did you get to this position?
Okay, well, I guess like many people, like many of your viewers, John, I think it's really come about from a lifelong passion, absolute enthusiasm since I was 3 or 4 years old for wildlife and nature, and I probably get that from my father, from my grandfather as well, and ever since I could remember, I've been turning over rocks and stones looking for snakes and lizards and frogs, toads, crickets, you name it. Every holiday, childhood holidays was spent a little bit like my parents watched My Family and Other Animals, and it just probably very reminiscent of their family life with me growing up. And so it's always been a very, very strong interest of mine. And I think when you're passionate about something, when you love something so much, that you're going to find a way to try and make those things happen for you. And of course, like anything, it involves luck, involves meeting the right people, and it involves hard work as well. But I think for me, one of my big passions is birds of prey. I've lost track of how many hours I've spent watching birds of prey. Most species off of mountains around the world and in forests and goodness knows where. And I'm a practicing falconer as well. And part of that was about bringing me closer to nature and being able to fly birds as they're intended to fly and be out in the wild with them. And I've done that for a long time. And I guess I was very lucky in that, having done that for a long time, an opportunity arose at London Zoo far too many years ago, several decades ago, in fact, where there was a position available to help with the bird show training team back in the late 90s. And I'd applied for that position. I was very, very lucky to have got that. And I worked my way up through there, really, flying birds, which then evolved into animal training. And I spent a long time working on an animal training team and met some amazing people. And I worked with people like Andy Halsworth, who's now at Banham Zoo, actually heading up the animal training teams there, and got to travel around, get to different countries, and work with a guy called Steve Martin, who runs Natural Encounters out in the States, and all these amazing people who really made a great name for themselves in that field. And so I've been very lucky being around people that you can learn an awful lot from, and they've been very generous in their knowledge. And so I worked through that program and did that for several years. An opportunity arose for me from an old university friend, actually, a guy called Nick Beale, who invited me out to go and work in a field project in Ecuador. And he was expedition leader, and he was looking for a field biologist to come out and help him, particularly with birds, working in and around the bird life out there. Now, I'm absolutely passionate about birds, but equally reptiles, amphibians, and inverts and fish, all kinds of things. So for me, it's not being a kid in a sweet shop. So I took up a sabbatical out of working at London Zoo and went out to Ecuador for quite a while, for many months, where I'd spend my time taking volunteers through the forest, identifying different tanager species, looking at orioles, Orphandula, all these different amazing birds. And then in the evenings when we were supposed to finish, I used to put my head torch on and go off looking for invertebrates and a wide range of different species, which was just fantastic. And you sit on the bank of the Rio Curare, which was a tributary of the Amazon, just watching toucans and macaws flying in each evening ready to roost. And it's something that sticks with me and will stick with me for life. And I talked to my son about it, who's now really engaged with wildlife and animals. So took me out doing that. I managed to return back to London, and I was actually offered the position of manager of the animal training team, which I took up for a few years, and basically running animal demonstrations and shows. After about 5 years, I was offered the position of zoo operations manager for London, which I took, managing the teams there. At the same time, I was chairing something which I'd chaired since 2011, which is for the European Zoo Association, which is the Bird of Prey and Owl Taxon Advisory Group. So we're looking at prioritising conservation breeding for specific raptor species in different zoos. And a lot of that work was really focusing on reintroductions as well. So we did a lot of vulture work around that time, particularly around working around the European species, so black vultures, Egyptian vultures, despite the name, they are found across Europe, and of course Eurasian griffon vultures and lammergeiers as well. So we did a lot of work with different collections, prioritising conservation status of those birds. And going out now, if you go to places like Jerez in Spain, it's the go-to place for vultures. You've got like 20,000 vulture, Eurasian griffon vultures across those Sierra Nevada mountain ranges, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And to me, it's a real success story, and it showcases some amazing collaborative work between in situ field conservationists and zoological organisations who have worked really hard and worked together to apply what those captive breeding teams know about in the zoological organisations, what the field biologists know, applying all of that together, and then seeing the release of these incredible birds. And it's just fantastic, and it's a really exciting project, and all of them are. The teams do a great job in doing all of that. So that's a passion. It's something I'm still heavily involved with now. I no longer chair. I stepped down from that in where are we now? I stepped down from chairing it in 2019 after doing 8 years, and but I'm still heavily involved as an advisor to the Taxon Advisory Group, and we get to work with those teams internationally still on an annual basis. Obviously, COVID permitting. So I've done that for quite a long time, and I think around about 2016, I was asked by the zoo director at the time at ZSL if I'd look after Whipsnade as well. So I became head of zoo management for London and Whipsnade zoos, which great, fantastic teams, really amazing working for such a big organisation for such a long time. I was there for just over 20 years, 21 years. So achieved an awful lot, worked with some phenomenal people, learned an awful lot, of course, as you do, being surrounded by so many experts. And then this incredible opportunity came up for me at Wildwood Trust, where I've spent a long time looking at international conservation and working overseas and working with different species, but actually not what I've got on my own doorstep. And there are species here that need a great deal of help and need highlighting. There's so many exciting projects on the horizon, and it was a great opportunity for me to become more actively involved in seeing birds like the chough come back to my own county, of Kent, and something like bison out in the Blean, which is such a breathtakingly exciting story. And even with species that we're not wilding, that we're not putting back, we've got bears that have come out of the most appalling conditions certainly in Bulgaria. We had last year, we were actually asked if we could help facilitate the rehoming of 2 orphaned Albanian bear cubs, which the mother had been disturbed by illegal logging. Albanian Wildlife Rescue had worked tirelessly to try and rehabilitate these youngsters back into the wild. They put in so much effort, but by that time they'd become quite habituated to people. So we're just in the process of building a very large forest home at our Devon Park for them, which is really exciting again. And a species that once existed across the United Kingdom, there's certainly a great ambassador, and for us to be able to give them a life is really exciting. So that's something. Lots of projects on the horizon, lots halfway through, and this year and certainly next are going to be extremely busy times.
What an absolutely fascinating career you've led. My next question is a simple question, but I'd like you to be as comprehensive as you possibly can. Mark, what skills do you need to do your job? Apart from, you obviously need to know about technology. You answered in the blink of an eye if when I asked you if you have Zoom. You're a falconer, you know about the falconer's knot and telemetry, but I imagine people skills are pretty high up there.
Yeah, I think that they have to be, because people are all very different, and you work with such diverse teams of people. And I think just having a degree of emotional intelligence in whatever field you're in, working with people, is really important. And particularly when you're going through periods like you are at the moment, where COVID has affected so many people in such different ways, you've got to be very understanding that people are all going through and experiencing different things at different times. And I think you've certainly got to have that degree of empathy and emotional intelligence around others, which I think you should have in all walks of life anyway. In terms of this specific job, I think, a degree of resilience as well, because things don't always go your way. It's, what it's like working with animals, working with people. Can be really challenging. Timelines fall by the wayside, and everything and anything could happen. And sometimes it does, and it's just being able to think on your feet, be resilient, and be collaborative as well. Make sure you utilize the skills of the people that you've got around you, because nobody knows everything. And I think sometimes, and particularly in the animal industry, people like to, and particularly in leadership roles, actually, I think you tend to find people want to have the answer. They want to be the person that's got all of the answers. And that's not always going to be you. That's not always the case. And I think it's very, very important that you recognise the skills of the people that you've got around you, and make sure everything that you're doing is a collaborative team effort, because you don't get anywhere on your own in this game. And I've been in it for a very long time, but I've been at Wildwood for a relatively short space of time, just over 2 years, and I've learned a tremendous amount. Including from people who've been in the game for like a year or so. And I think it's really important that you're open to the fact that people will have different knowledge to you, regardless as to how long they've been doing something. And being open enough to understand that will make you a far better leader to the teams that you have around you.
Do you think it's possible to learn leadership, or does a person have to be born a leader?
To learn it?
Yes. You have to be. Can you learn it, or do you have to be born a leader?
No, I think you can learn it. I think you often learn through experience, that's for sure, and no one will ever tell you that they do things the right way from day one. I think that if you've done it for quite a while and you've led teams, and I do now. I don't always do things. I make mistakes. We all do, and I think that as long as you have the ability to learn from that and make sure that you can support your team, support teams around you, and bring them forward, drive them forward, and treat people how you'd want to be treated yourself. I think that is probably one of the big drivers for me, is that I don't ask people to do things that I wouldn't do, and I certainly hope I wouldn't treat people how I wouldn't want to be treated. And I think those traits are common decency. And I think if you've got common decency, you've got drive, and you've got a good vision, like strategic way of thinking. I think that's quite important, looking strategically at where you are now, where your team are, where your park is, and where you want to be in 5 years, and being able to deliver those steps throughout a integrated period. So making sure that people are well communicated to, and they understand what is the end goal, what are we here for, what are we doing, and how are we going to get to where we want to end up. I think making sure that's clear is a good show of leadership, I think.
A slightly sort of different question. What other personal qualities do you think are necessary to do your job? You've mentioned resilience. What else?
Sense of humour. I think you've got to have a sense of humour for sure. Don't take yourself too seriously, because I think if you do and things go wrong, you lose a bit of that dynamic ability to react to things appropriately. Have a laugh. It's really important, I think, that people enjoy their job, and I think you've got to understand, no one comes into the animal field to be a millionaire. No one's going to leave here absolutely loaded, and no one does it for that reason. So I think it's very, very important that people enjoy their job. they've got to love it. They've got to come to work. It's a vocational thing that we're all doing, and make it a bit of fun. Enjoy it. I love coming in and seeing the teams laughing and joking. I think it's brilliant. It's a breath of fresh air, and I think that's what it's all about as well. Partly, people are laughing, they're happy, then they're going to do their jobs well, and I think that's very important. Never taking yourself too seriously. Be prepared to work hard. There's no such thing as a 9-to-5 job in animal working, as I'm sure all of your viewers will be fully aware. You've got to be flexible. You've got to have that flexible approach. You've got to be a team player, but you've got to be resilient enough to work on your own as well. So there's an awful lot is expected of people in the animal industry, and perhaps I would say more now than ever before. And I think that particularly, certainly in captive animal management, I think that it's changed. That industry, zookeeping as it once was traditionally, it doesn't exist anymore. I think the days of coming in, cleaning out an animal, putting some food in, and you've done your job, those days have gone. You've got to be everything when you're looking after animals now. You've got to be a biologist, you've got to be a field biologist, you've got to understand animal behavior. You've got to understand environmental parameters so much more now. You've got to be able to test water quality for your fish, even for your aquatic birds. You've got to be a nutritionist. You've got to understand the diet of those animals and work collaboratively with veterinary teams. You've got to be proficient now on computers. A lot of our information is shared via ZIMS, which is a Zoo Information Management System, which is shared all around the world. So you can look at animals in any collection and see what they've been fed, have a look at their diet, see how they're cared for. And so you've got to be everything. It's a far more scientific approach than even that we saw 15 years ago. It's really professionalized an awful lot, and I think it's much better for it.
Rewilding seems to be quite a new term. I've been abroad for years. I've only been back in the country 3 years, but that seems to be a relatively new term to me. How would you describe that as a movement today, Mark?
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting. It's I think as a movement, generically it's looking back at restoring landscapes through the use of specific species that are eco-engineers, essentially, to almost bring back the environment to what it's perceived as what it should be, to what it once was. It's a controversial term, I have to say, and for the Bison Project, we tend to use the term wilding because we don't know for absolute sure that we've ever had bison in the Blean Woods in Kent before. So we're not rewilding them. We're not re-putting bison back. We don't know that. We're wilding that area and using those animals. We hope to restore that habitat as it once was. But rewilding as a movement, it's gained huge amounts of momentum. It's not always the most popular term, and in some respects, I think it's alienated communities or individuals, and particularly farming communities. And I know I've been working up in working in Wales fairly recently, and that term of rewilding it causes a degree of not anger, but certainly frustration, particularly from farming communities in those areas. And I don't think it's always got the most positive association with it. And that's largely down to community engagement and making sure that all stakeholders have the opportunity to be involved in those discussions. Because if you're planning on affecting landscapes by introducing species into them, what are the impacts to everybody? And it's really easy to say. For someone like myself, it's very easy to think, I want to see lynx back. I'd love to see lynx reintroduced as a rewilding project. But that has an impact on huge amounts of people, on the countryside on the whole, on farming, on gamekeeping. Lots and lots of different stakeholders have their own thoughts on that. And they mustn't be dismissed, because these are important people. They're important to the countryside. They're important in terms of their knowledge of the countryside and knowledge of species in and around those areas. And they have a lot of influence, they have a lot of say, and they have a right to a voice. And I think it's very easy or has been easy to be quite dismissive, because there's been this huge focus, this dogged determination to get something done without thinking of all of the stakeholders that could impact. So I think the term rewilding, I think rewilding in itself as a movement, I think it's really exciting. I think it's something that I'm very much behind in terms of what it could bring to our countryside, to the UK, how it would shape our landscapes using species. But there's an awful lot of work to do, and there are an awful lot of individuals or organisations that can make it work and need to be involved in it. You know, I mean, the success of Pine Martins has relied heavily on gamekeepers supporting that project and notifying wildlife trusts when Pine Martins are being seen, and that's great, and it's collaborative. And you know, I think sometimes countryside workers, those people living in the countryside that work around the countryside, their views and thoughts haven't been accounted for as much as they need to be. But that needs to change moving forward.
How do you see it 10, 20 years from now, Mark? I mean, do you see us talking about minimum viable populations of brown bears, of Scottish wildcats? How do you see it going?
Yeah, I think being realistic about it, I think the apex predators that you're looking at in terms of rewilding project, I don't see a time, certainly in my lifetime, where we'll be looking at bears or wolves coming back to the UK. Personally, I don't think so. I do think, and I do hope that we'd see lynx back in time. I think that if we've got enough forested areas, they're like ghosts of a forest. You're not likely to see very much of them. But wildcats, I'm hoping, will pave the way for small carnivores. We've already had the success of the white-tailed seagulls off the Isle of Wight. Again, large predatory species, but doing really well. And people are taking an awful lot of pride in that as well. And the excitement that a species like that initiates when it turns up, when a white-tailed seagull turns up, as it did last week, sitting on a beach at Reculver in Kent, sitting there picking open some shellfish. I mean, it makes national news, and it's exciting. And I just think, God, if I was a kid on a beach and I'd seen a white-tailed seagull sitting there in Kent, I think I'd have fainted. It's just so exciting. And that's what I see. I think I see a time where school lessons talk about native species in the UK, and we talk not about what once was, but what we now have. And I like to think that in 20 years' time, we're really talking about how the red squirrel is making its comeback, how pine martins are back in the southeast and doing really well, the red-billed chuff along all of our coastlines where they once existed. I'd love to be talking about wildcats and how they're thriving. And, you know, potentially it's not beyond reach to be talking about the lynx reintroduction as well. And I think that would be for me, I think that'd be absolutely fantastic. Wolves, bears, not so sure. I mean, you know, wolves, they're not far away. A female was run over in Belgium not very long ago, at the beginning of this year. And they're certainly very close to us on the continent. And I think this is the thing that is quite easy to forget. And I think we have in the UK, you forget. One of my colleagues said it, and she was actually right. We've forgotten how to live with wildlife, because you go to France, you go to Spain, you've got lynx, you've got wildcats, there's wolves across Italy, across much of Europe. Because we don't have those animals anymore, you know, it initiates this response of fear quite frequently in a lot of people, and that's because we don't have them. And it's about bringing back the unknown to some regards. And yeah, you look in North America, people got, and I've been there and seen it myself, with black bears rummaging through bins, and you know, there's wolves out across Colorado, and all of these incredible species that have relatively low impact. There's very little human-animal conflict in areas like that with those species. And I think these northern hemisphere species, like wolves and bears, they don't cause huge amounts of impact. But as a small island, you know, we've changed immeasurably, and I can't foresee a time when in my lifetime the wolves will be back. I'd love to think they would be, but I think it's unlikely. But lynx, certainly, I could see that.
Second to last question. If somebody wants to be in your position, if somebody aspires to do what you do, Mark, what should they aspire to be doing? Becoming a zookeeper, a field biologist, or what?
Well, it's a good question, John. I think that it depends what part of that field they want to do. But I think if they were wanting to do what is similar to what I'm doing, it's just getting yourself out there. And a lot of people now, they volunteer. They spend some time working with an organisation, learning a lot of key skills, and volunteering. Even one day a week, one day a fortnight, it makes an immeasurable difference to how you're looked upon when positions come up. Because actually, from my point of view, and I felt the same at ZSL as I do now, if I've got someone coming in rain, snow, no matter what, one day a week, they're not being paid. When a job turns up, I'm looking at them. They're a known quantity to me already, and I think that people that put themselves out there a little bit more are the ones that often get noted quite rightly first. And I'm really pleased that I've been able to give positions most regularly to people that have volunteered. And I think, getting a volunteer position can be quite challenging, but working hard, knuckling down, showing your passion for the environment and wildlife, and getting out there and talking about what you do. And of course, social media now has an awful lot of influence and has a lot of followers. And people set up these pages on Instagram, which is just absolutely fascinating. And just even showcasing some of those things that you do on social media are a real big help, because promoting yourself is great, but if you can do that, you can probably promote an organisation and promote the work that your organisation is putting out. So there's an awful lot of things that you can do, and I think where there's a will, there's a way. I really do believe that. And it's a hard time for a lot of young people out there at the moment, or for a lot of people in general trying to get into any industry, but don't give up, because it's there for you. And these kind of projects, these kind of roles, they're only going to expand. There's only going to be more of it, I think. There's more drive and need for the countryside, for wildlife within it, than there ever has been. And I think of all of the bad things that have come out of this pandemic, some of the real good things that have come out of it is this highlighting how important the countryside is. And people have had more access to it now, and understand more about what's around them, and hopefully looked after it a lot. So I think there's a real movement and a real push to support wildlife conservation and nature, and it's all there for the taking.
Have you got anything else to add, Mark?
Just that I wish all your viewers the very best, and if there's anything I can ever do to help people, John, you get in touch with me and I'd be glad to. If there's any specific questions anyone has, I'd be happy to answer them as well.
Mark Habben, Director of Zoo Operations at the Wildwood Trust. That was absolutely fascinating, and thank you very much for being on The Practical Animal.
It's my absolute pleasure, John. Really good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.